The Elder's body is poisoned now. Not in the way it was before. The cloud, the staff, the controlled release. That was management. This is transformation. He shed the last pretense of a fight and turned his own flesh into a weapon. And the rules that governed everything before this moment simply no longer apply. The white dragon blade has been pushing his poison back since the exchange opened, extracting what gets through, regenerating what it touches.
But the 8th stage doesn't work like the 7th. It doesn't release poison. It becomes it. Every strike now is contact with something that would dissolve stone, and the blade that cut through everything else in this examination is starting to lose ground. The Elder knows it. He says so. Dares Yeo-Un to try stopping him with that beloved weapon of his. It's the first time he sounded confident since the fight began, and he's not wrong to be. But there's a gap between the blade isn't enough, and there's no way through. Yeo-Un finds it. He stops trying to push the poison back entirely. He channels everything inward instead. Blue energy, dense and cold, compressed until the air around him shifts. Then he moves. Not technique, not form, just closing the distance before the Elder can recalibrate, getting inside the reach where the poison output matters less than the physical body producing it. The blade connects at close range. Once, twice. The Elder tries to counter. A poison palm strike that would end most things, but the arm gets redirected before it lands. Another slash, another, the sound of impact. Then dust and silence. When it clears, Yeo-Un is standing. The Elder is not. The crowd doesn't immediately react. That's the tell. When people don't make noise, it means what just happened hasn't finished arriving yet. Then the whispers start, and the name that travels through them is not Warden Chen. It's the other one. The one that means something different now. He killed the chief of the Poison Sect. In his final form, the form no one takes head on, the form that turned the Wu-Tang Sect's master to nothing. That form, and this kid walked through it with a saber and his own 2 hands. He's bleeding. He doesn't look at it. What he's doing instead is standing there with the weight of what he knows settling into something harder than satisfaction. The dancing butterfly technique carried him most of the way, but most of the way is where people die. Against an opponent's true last resort, his best technique wasn't enough. He had to improvise through the final exchange, and improvisation has a ceiling. The enemies ahead of him will have their own final forms, their own last resort techniques the dancing butterfly can't break. He needs more. Not frustration, a directive. The 9th Elder is in the crowd with his son. He watched the whole thing. The young man standing in that ring was, by every measure that existed before this cohort began, a nobody. 4 years later, he's standing over the corpse of a former Poison Sect chief who fought him in full-body transformation poison form and lost. The Elder's son has already made his decision about which candidate deserves his support. His father doesn't argue with it. An hour later, Yeo-Un is alone in a room with Lee, and the man who has been watching him from a careful distance since the very first examination finally says what he came to say. He was never just the Academy deputy. He is the left-hand royal bodyguard to the Patriarch, one of 3 houses that have served the demonic cult since its founding, houses whose only allegiance is to the true successor of the demonic lord's wisdom. He couldn't act while the Academy's rules were in place, but the 6th examination is over. The rules no longer apply to him. He asks Yeo-Un directly whether he has attained the demonic lord's wisdom. Yeo-Un doesn't confirm it. He doesn't trust someone this close to the Patriarch, and he says so plainly. Hwamyang accepts that without flinching, says he expected it, and then sets aside the question of trust entirely and offers something else instead. A secret. One that almost nobody living knows. What follows is 500 years of history, compressed into the shape of a threat that never went away. The demonic cult was not always what it is. The original succession had no competition, no examination, no minor priesthood. A woman chosen as the divine maiden selected the Patriarch directly. A single mind, responsible for keeping the sects balanced against each other. Then a Patriarch went on pilgrimage to the cult's ancestral home in Xinjiang, the journey every leader was required to make within 10 years of their appointment. He brought his retinue. He brought the right-hand royal bodyguard. He brought nearly everyone. Almost none of them came back. The man responsible was not an enemy sect, not a Murim alliance, not a political rival. He was a martial artist so far beyond the frame of what was considered possible that he didn't need allies or strategy. He simply arrived and people died. The Berserk Saber God, a monk from Shaolin who had already killed 2 of the top 5 martial artists in the land before the pilgrimage even happened, and would kill a third after.
and whose saber technique was so overwhelming that the greatest swordsman the demonic cult ever produced, a man who spent years training specifically to defeat him, still walked away from their 4-day battle missing his right arm. That swordsman was the Sword Demon, and after that fight ended in something that wasn't quite a draw and wasn't quite a loss, the Berserk Saber God said 3 words and disappeared. "I will be back." 500 years and no sign of him, but Hwamyong is not speaking in the past tense. He says a descendant could appear with the specific weight of someone who has been watching for exactly that. The Sword Demon, armless, stepped down from his role stabilizing the cult and left behind something more durable than his position. He built the academy, not to find a successor to the demonic lord's art. That was always secondary. He built it to produce warriors capable of countering the Berserk Saber God's technique, because the technique he never got to finish developing is buried in the marks left on his own severed arm. He moved the evidence into the manual library. He organized everything he knew. And then he died, and 5 centuries passed, and no one was ever able to do anything with it, until now. Hwamyong takes Yeo-Un underground, beneath the library. In a vault that has been sealed since the Sword Demon's time, there is a preserved arm. Specifically, a right arm, severed at the shoulder. The cuts along its surface so precise and deep that they read less like wounds and more like data. The final form of the Berserk Saber God's technique, recorded in the Sword Demon's own flesh, because that was the only medium that survived the battle. There are also manuals. The Sword Demon's own sword art, a new technique built off his counter-method research, an analysis of the Saber God's weaknesses that didn't reach any useful conclusion. Yeo-Un looks at the arm. He doesn't need Hwamyong to explain what it means. The cuts on that arm are the highest level saber technique ever recorded, preserved in the only place it could be, on the person who received it. And he has Nano. Nano can read those marks. Nano can reconstruct the forms from the geometry of the wounds, extrapolate the circulation from the depth and angle of each cut, build a simulation of something that has not existed in 500 years. He tells Nano to start scanning. A week passes. The Academy's numbers are almost unrecognizable now. Nearly 1,000 students entered. 64 remain. 7 passed the 5th examination. 1 passed the 6th. The grand tournament for minor priesthood is down to 2 candidates, Yeo-Un and his rival from the Shadow Sect, and 5 months left on the clock. Yeo-Un spends that week in the adamantine stone training rooms, alone, pushing through the reconstruction 1 form at a time. Nano extracted 6 saber forms from the marks on the Sword Demon's arm. 3 months of circulation analysis turned raw geometry into something executable. By the end of the week, the first codified fighting form of the Berserk Saber God's technique exists again, for the first time in 5 centuries, and Yeo-Un is the only person alive who can perform it. His rivals are not idle. 2 members of his opponent's faction meet in the northwestern field while their leader is in isolation refining his own techniques. The conversation is strategic and cold. Yeo-Un just killed the Poison Sect's chief in front of everyone. Direct confrontation is off the table, and both of them know it. The better move is older than any of the techniques in this academy. Find the people who already hate him, and point them. There are 4. All of them have personal grievances. All of them have been waiting. They don't approach Yeo-Un in the training room. They let him come to the cafeteria. The poison is already in the food by then. It's not a simple compound. Blood-spitting poison combined with poison essence, built from the destructive demonic poison state itself. The same technique that nearly killed Yeo-Un in the 6th examination, distilled and administered internally. Defensive energy seals the body's surface. It blocks poisons trying to enter from outside. It cannot block what is already inside. The effect? Internal energy locked for approximately 6 hours. And the poison does not simply wait. It begins dissolving from within, a painful and total destruction if nothing interrupts it. They tell him this to his face. Outside in the dark, 4 against 1. The one who speaks is Yujik. Red-haired, deliberate. Here because Yeo-Un severed his sister's arm in a prior examination, and the debt has been waiting ever since. Beside him, the grandson of the elder who just died. 4 people with 4 different reasons to want the same outcome, and the confidence of knowing he can't use his internal energy to fight his way out. Yeo-Un cuts one of them down before the sentence is finished. He says he doesn't have time for this, and the way he says it isn't bravado. It's logistics. Whatever is happening to his followers right now, it's happening without him there to stop it. The poison is real. The clock is running. He has 4 opponents and a body that can't access its own power, and he moves anyway. But Yeo-Un knew before he took a single step outside. He'd already had Nano scan the soup. Harmful energy detected, dispersing through the body. exactly as suspected. So he gave a quiet instruction. Hold it in place, don't let it spread. And his system confirmed it could be done. He ate anyway, let the clock run, walked into what was waiting for him, like a man who'd already finished the fight in his head. 4 of them, each one carrying a grudge he handed them personally. The first one drops before the others can blink. One exchange down. The remaining 3 close in, and there's a moment where they might actually believe they still have a chance. He disabuses them of that quickly. Blue energy tears through the dark. Someone hits the ground hard enough that nobody speaks. One of them tries to plead. He lifts them by the collar, and another one shouts for him to stop. And then there's a crack that ends the conversation entirely. He didn't hesitate. He wasn't supposed to. This was the answer to a question they asked by showing up at all. His followers arrive moments later, sprinting, breathless, calling out for him. He tells them he's fine. Then he asks the real question. Did Muyon's people come for them too? The look on their faces tells him everything. He pieces it together fast. 4 sect descendants united to kill him. Only the Shadow Sect sent a separate team to recruit his followers. The timing deliberate. The recruitment pitch designed to stall and distract while the ambush landed. It was the same tactic his rival had been running on the other sects for months. Turn your enemies against each other. Let someone else do the work. They'd used it on him. His expression doesn't change when he figures it out. He just files it and moves. The rival himself is in an isolation room when the ambush happens. He knows the poison probably won't be enough to kill someone at Yeo-Un's level. It said as much internally. A calculated gamble, not a conviction. If Yeo-Un survives, the Shadow Sect can point at the Poison Sect's tactics and walk away clean. If he doesn't, even better. He was wrong about that. By morning, 4 bodies are laid out in the open, and Professor Ho is escorting Muyan Chen and a follower to the deputy's office. The authority waiting for them has the kind of patience that comes from seeing people lie to him for years. He gets straight to the point. Did you 2 do this? They blame Yeo-Un. That was their plan all along. What follows is one of the coldest things Yeo-Un has ever done in front of witnesses. He asks to examine the bodies himself. Permission granted. He crouches down and reads each one like a document. This man's arm, severed by that man's blade technique. This man's chest, pierced by that man's sound sword. This one's back, palm marks. The flowing dark cloud palm, 4th form of the Shadow Sect's moving cloud technique. And this one, the last. Internal injuries and blood loss consistent with a dual technique. The right sword and left palm simultaneously. The Shadow Sect's most closely guarded secret. He stands up. He looks at the man across from him. And he says calmly that if he was the one who killed all 4 of them, he would have needed to master a remarkably wide variety of techniques from completely different sects. The room goes quiet. He isn't wrong. And the bodies can't contradict him. What the rival puts together on his own, from inside his isolation room, is the full shape of it. Yeo-Un saw the Shadow Sect's dual technique exactly once, 3 years ago, for a few seconds during an examination. He recreated it from memory. Then he staged 4 bodies to look like 5 men killed each other, using the correct wound signatures for each sect's techniques, which means when those bodies go home, each sect will look at the wounds and see the hands of their enemies, not Yeo-Un's, each other's. The rival thinks he used our own strategy against us. The deputy reads the scene from his office afterward, alone with his thoughts. He turns it over. Not even a master could perfectly recreate a technique from a single observation, let alone the Shadow Sect's rarest form. And yet, he thinks about what the Patriarch has been trying to do for years. Weaken the 6 sects, pull the foundations out from under the power structure they've calcified into. Years of effort, deliberate and patient. And Yeo-Un just did it in a single night, with 4 bodies and a few well-placed bruises. The deputy thinks he's ready. The rival and his lieutenant are taken to the detention center. Their internal energies are sealed. The academy that was supposed to belong to them now belongs entirely to someone else. The followers who pledged themselves to the rival's cause start walking away. First 1, then a handful, then 7 students in a single day. Across the city, the Poison Sect is burning. The minor chief received his cousin's body. He received the news about who visited their father before the 6th examination, and who didn't bother to show up at the funeral. That last part, the Shadow Sect's Lady Mu, who pulled the strings that got his grandfather into that examination hall in the first place, who let him walk into a fight he wouldn't survive, and then couldn't find the time to attend the burial. That's what tips the scales. He calls his people together. He says they move tonight. They get to the Shadow Sect manor and find it empty. Not abandoned, empty on purpose. The arrows come from everywhere, infused with internal energy. Not ordinary iron, not ordinary aim. Someone shouts trap, and then it's just noise and blood and people trying to fight their way out of a cage they walked into themselves. The minor chief rallies what's left. He says they'll fight to the death. He means it. He just doesn't have enough left for it to matter. Lady Mu steps out of the dark. The Poison Sect minor chief thought he knew what she was. The first concubine of the patriarch. A political figure. An elevated guest. Someone with connections and maneuvering ability, but not the kind of danger you point a weapon at. He was wrong about that. The same way people are always wrong about her, because she made sure they would be. She wasn't hiding her strength out of modesty. She was keeping it for exactly this. She cuts him down. The fight is short. 1 slash. After, she stands in the cleared manor and issues orders with the same tone you'd use to arrange a schedule. The Poison Sect won't move again without their chief. Fine, leave them. The young masters in the academy can stay in detention a while longer. Muyeon moved too fast, too sure of himself, and lost. Then she says the part that actually matters. Yeo-Un is too strong for Muyeon to handle. She'll have to deal with him herself. She wants someone interrogating the old guard who raised Yeo-Un before the academy. She wants the names and locations of every student who's been expelled. She's not reacting anymore. She's building something. 4 days after the bodies were found, Yeo-Un tells his people he's leaving the academy. The reaction is immediate and loud, but he has his reasons, and both of them are the same kind of reasoning he always uses. Not emotional, not reactive, just cold and precise. The patriarch and most of the senior leadership are away from the capital. The normal watchers aren't watching. And there are people outside these walls worth recruiting who won't come to him, so he's going to them. The ones who've earned it pack up without being asked. The rest he tells to stay and train. He says it plainly. If you want to be useful to him, be stronger first. That night, he walks up to the gates of a manor on the western edge of the city, the home of the Flying Phantom Sect, and he doesn't knock. He holds up a jade medallion, 12, the Elder's token, and he delivers a message through the guard. The 12th Elder has come to speak with the 11th. They're brought to a room with 7 men seated in a row. All 7 have the same face, not similar, identical. Same lines, same beard, same wrinkles. Same energy radiating off every single one of them, in a frequency so perfectly matched, Nano can't find a seam. The chief of this place, the Phantom of 1,000 Faces, has trained these 7 to be him in every measurable way. One of Yeo-Un's followers says out loud what everyone in the room is thinking. They all look exactly the same. The actual chief greets them warmly. He references a meeting with one of Yeo-Un's followers years ago, before the academy. Then he drops the pleasantries and gets to it. You're here for the medallion. He knew the moment the message came through the gate. He explains the system. 12 elder acknowledgements, or 12 sect chief endorsements. Either path leads to the minor priesthood. Yeo-Un already has one. The medallion isn't just given, it's earned. There will be 2 tests. The first one, identify the true chief. Yeo-Un looks at the row of 7 identical men. Then he turns around. In the corner of the room, standing apart from everything, is a figure in red and gold robes. Bright eyes, watching. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from being unimportant. He says, I found you. Here's what happened. Huan had been communicating through distant whispering, a technique that requires the speaker's vocal cords to vibrate, even slightly, when they use it. 7 men in the room. None of their throats moved. One did, the woman in red and gold. Nanny caught the frequency difference before anyone else registered there was a difference to catch. The first test is done. The second starts immediately. No warning, no preamble. Huan moves, and the attack that comes isn't a sparring strike. It's the full technique of the Flying Phantom Sect's chief, a saber form called the Slash of the Phantom Shadow, and the force of it hits the room like a wall collapsing inward. Yeo-Un answers with the dancing butterfly. They trade. Huan is fast and sharp and watching Yeo-Un with the particular attention of someone cataloging a threat. He recognizes the saber work. He knows where Yeo-Un trained. He's seen the technique from the 5th floor library, and what he's watching now is something more refined than any manual contains. But Yeo-Un can feel the ceiling. The dancing butterfly alone isn't going to close this. He's been in that position before, against every opponent who had something in reserve he didn't have an answer for. And what he learned from each of those fights is that the next level isn't waiting for him to get stronger. It's already there. He just has to use it. He shifts his stance, something Ui-Huan has never seen. He tells Ui-Huan to block with everything he has. What comes next is the ascension of the flying blade-wielding phantom. Spinning blade forms stacked and accelerating, the kind of output that doesn't leave room for half measures. Ui-Huan's guard is not enough. The slash opens across his face. He goes down. Outside the manor, the tension in the courtyard doesn't go anywhere pleasant. Then Ui-Huan walks out and kneels. I, Ui-Huan, 11th Elder and Chief of the Flying Phantom Sect. He says it cleanly, formally, with no qualifier and no hesitation. Acknowledge you as fit for the minor priesthood, young Lord Yeo-Un Chen. Please accept this as a token of my loyalty. He extends the jade medallion. Yeo-Un now holds 2. Inside, Ui-Huan explains what the Flying Phantom Sect is. Not the version people believe, but the real one, the one that has existed since the cult's founding. An assassination, an infiltration order, bound to the patriarch, bound to concealment. Their core technique requires something most people would call a sacrifice, and it is made young, and it is permanent. Ui-Huan has no children. What he has instead is a pupil, still back at the academy, still wearing a skin mask that Yeo-Un had already clocked before he ever left the grounds. There is one other thing Ui-Huan wants to say before they're done. He looks at Gyu-Moon. He asks pleasantly when she intends to take off her mask. Yeo-Un accepts the guest house for the night and declines the escort. His home, the house in the south corner of the city where he grew up, where Guard Jang kept the yard swept, and the training hours long and the evenings quiet, is exactly the same as he left it. Nothing missing, nothing moved. The courtyard is clean. That's the problem. Guard Jang's belongings are inside. His things are where they always were. The room is cold, not the cold of an open window, but the cold of a room that hasn't held a living person in 3 or 4 days. Yeo-Un puts his hand on the surface, and the answer is right there in the temperature of it. He tells Nano to scan. Nano finds faint marks on a pillar in the courtyard. Not sword cuts, not physical blade damage, sword energy. The attack that took Guard Jang was controlled, careful, and thorough enough to leave almost nothing behind. Almost. There's a sword mark on a pillar, faint, made with energy, not steel. 3 sects in this city use sword techniques at that level. Of those 3, one already has reasons to move against Yeo-Un that none of the others do. The Shadow Sect. He doesn't move on it directly, not yet, so he waits. He puts himself somewhere visible. He uses what he has. Somewhere else in the city, Guard Jang is chained to a wall with blood on his hands and his chest and his face, and the woman interrogating him is the same woman who visited the Poison Sect chief before the 6th examination, who passed microtoxins to a concubine years ago, who sent a dead man's grandson into the night with poisoned food and a plan. Lady Mu stands in that room with a red veil over her face and asks whether Guard Jang ever taught Yeo-Un martial arts. Guard Jang says no. She gets the news about the academy a little while later. Yeo-Un Chen has left the grounds, out in the open, no institutional protection. She lets herself feel satisfied about that. At the Swift Gales Inn, the plan is simple. Bait in the open, eyes on everything. 3 scouts sent into the city to watch the suspect sects. Wang Ho-ko goes to the musician sect and comes back clean. The other 2 don't come back on schedule. An hour passed when they should have returned. Then more time. Yeo-Un watches the door and doesn't say much. Then Nano catches something. A frequency threading through the ambient noise of the inn. Directed. Distant whispering. Tight and deliberate. Come to the Poison Sect manor by 1 in the morning. Come alone. Come without your saber. The source is at the inn entrance. Yeo-Un moves before his follower finishes processing what just happened. He finds the sender, a cloaked figure, face covered, and the message that follows the first one is the one with teeth. Bring the saber and a follower dies before you reach the door. Don't show up and the guard dies too. Yeo-Un grabs the man's arm. His energy shifts. That dark presence, the one that sits underneath everything else he carries, and it surfaces without a clean leash on it. Not rage, something colder than rage and less predictable. He puts the sender down. He goes to find out what's waiting for him. At 1 in the morning, the west corner of the demonic cult city sits quiet. White masked figures watch from the rooftops as a man in a red cloak walks toward the Poison Sect manor. They nod to each other. They let him through. The doors open onto rows of the Poison Sect's members assembled in formation, and somewhere behind them, the kind of presence that doesn't belong to ordinary fighters. Yeo-Un feels them before he sees them. He scans without moving, and what he reads in the crowd is that these people came ready to finish something. Then Lady Mu steps forward, and they are finally in the same room. She tells him that before his mother died, she visited the other concubines. She tells him that someone instructed Lady Hua not to foster Yeo-Un's internal energy before he entered the academy. She tells him he looks just like her. She tells him both of them were useful. It lands the way she intends it to, not as grease, not as anger, but as a calculation delivered to someone she expects to break under it. Yeo-Un asks about Guard Jang, about his followers. She tells him not to be foolish about it. He reaches into his coat and produces a box. He tosses it to her. She catches it with a bad feeling already forming, the kind of instinct that has kept someone like her alive through every political maneuver she's run in this faction, and she opens it anyway. Inside the box is an eye, human, bloody, set against a black interior, like something offered on purpose. Lady Mu stares at it, and the composure she walked into this room wearing does something it hasn't done yet in this confrontation. It cracks. She starts to ask what this means. Yeo-Un is already smiling. Wrong question, he says. What you should be asking is who that eye belongs to. 4 hours earlier, he was standing in the Academy's detention center. Mu Yanchen was chained in front of him. Even with his energy sealed, even reduced to this, Mu Yan's instincts told him the truth the moment Yeo-Un walked through the door. He couldn't withstand this, not even close. So he knelt before he was told to. Yeo-Un had originally planned to free his guard and be done with it. He changed his mind when he found out who was behind everything. Lady Mu cared about one thing more than her own life. He reached for it, he took the eye, he put it in a box, he handed the 11th Elder's badge to Lady Mu's subordinates with instructions to release his people, and then he walked into the Serpent's Maw and waited for her to figure out what she was holding. She figured it out. Lady Mu sent her uncle, an elder-level fighter, to the academy with a team. The plan: release the hostages, ambush Yeo-Un's followers the moment they were free, re-secure Mu Yanchen and Jiayan, and come out on top. The kind of operation she had been running for years. The academy professors were already there. The intrusion was detected before it started. Her uncle scrambled to abort. Huamyong Li found him on the grounds, and that was the end of him. Back at the manor, Lady Mu sat with her tea going cold. An hour passed. No word. Then more time. She understood what that meant. She started preparing to retreat to the Shadow Sect, and then the ground shook. Huamyong landed at the manor with the force of someone who had stopped pretending, and from the outside, surrounding every exit, the Flying Phantom Sect had already closed the ring. Her people felt it before they could act, something pressing down on the air, weight that didn't belong to anything human. It was Yeo-Un's energy. He wasn't hiding it. He didn't need to anymore. Lady Mu had spent years building toward this moment. She looked at what she had left, and she did the math. She knelt. She acknowledged him as the minor priest. She pledged the Shadow Sect would never touch him. She silenced Mu Yanchen when he protested, and told her son to bow, that this was the only way to save his life. The Shadow Sect warriors around her dropped to their knees and begged. Yeo-Un looked at all of it. Then he told his people to let them go. Huamyong questioned that, but Yeo-Un wasn't releasing them out of mercy. Lady Mu was known as the Lady of Steel. She was not the kind of woman who would let a public humiliation stand. He knew what she would do the moment she felt free. He waited until she was standing, then he moved. He didn't go for her. He went for Mu Yanchen. The slashes came fast. Too fast to stop, too deliberate to mistake for rage. Yeo-Un cut through him in front of his mother, and Lady Mu couldn't do anything except watch. When she screamed for her son, when she begged and said he had nothing to do with any of this, that she was the one who set the trap, that her son was innocent, Yeo-Un turned to her. "You were the one who killed my mother." Because before any of this happened, before he ever walked into that manor, a letter had arrived. It came from Zhang Sumchen, a man who had spent the last few years in an infirmary with his cultivation permanently destroyed. A man with nothing left but what he knew. The letter told Yeo-Un everything, whose followers had taken his people, how Lady Hua had really died, and one detail that cut deeper than the rest. Even the patriarch didn't know the full truth. Zhang Sumchen did, because Zhang Sumchen had been part of it. Lady Mu was the one who made sure Lady Hua died, and she was the one who made sure her children were targeted. 5 years. That's how long he had been carrying it. He said it once, clearly, and then he cut out her eyes, then her tongue. She was still breathing when he gave her the last words she would ever hear: repent for as long as it takes, and then go to hell. Then he ordered everyone in the room killed. The Flying Phantom Sect chief, and Hwamyeon moved through those men without slowing. Everything was settled before dawn. By morning, the word was already spreading through the city. The Poison Sect was gone. The Shadow Sect was gone. Both of them, in a single night. People were still trying to piece together what had happened, who had done it, how it was possible, and Yeo-Un had already given them an answer. The Flying Phantom Sect had seeded the rumors. The story the public heard was the story Yeo-Un had written for them, pointing blame exactly where he needed it to land before the Shadow Sect's chief could return and see the wreckage for himself. Jinwon-mu was still out there, still away, still didn't know. That was a problem Yeo-Un was leaving alive on purpose. That was the word the physician gave. Survived, stable, but the damage was permanent. Every tooth gone. Soft foods for the rest of his life. Yeo-Un sat with that through the night, and nobody who saw him asked questions. By morning, he looked like a man who had not slept and had no intention of explaining why. There were still 8 elders who hadn't pledged to him. The patriarch would return eventually. The window was narrowing, and he knew it. The next target was the 10th elder, a woman named Yeo-Un, chief of a sect so small it barely qualified as one. She was the only martial artist in it. She never attended elder meetings unless the patriarch personally ordered it. She never left her compound. Every 10 years, she met privately with the chiefs of the Sword Sect and the Shadow Sect, both of which no longer existed, and nobody knew what those meetings were about. Hwamyeon had said it plainly. She was stronger than him. Standard approach failed at the gate. The servant came back with a single answer. The chief did not meet with anyone who wasn't sent by the patriarch. Yeo-Un tried the direct approach anyway. He released a sweep of sword energy across the compound grounds, enough to make the air hum, enough to reach someone with martial instincts and make those instincts wake up. She didn't bite. He asked the servant to carry one last message, not a challenge, just a question. Would she walk the same path as the Shadow Sect and the Sword Sect? The door opened. She was already holding a sword when they walked in. She dismissed her attendants, turned to face him, and made her position clear without ambiguity. She bowed to no one except the patriarch. Not the 12th elder, not a Chown bloodline, nobody. Then she attacked. The technique she launched was precise and devastating, the kind of form that carries generations of refinement in every motion. Yeo-Un read it, matched the line, and shut it down. One counter, clean stop. They both went still. She stared at him. He stared back. Her servant had gone pale. One of Yeo-Un's people exhaled a name, the Sword Demon, and Yeo-Un shook his head. Not quite. Evolved. The 10th Elder's next words weren't a threat or a follow-up attack. They were a question she clearly hadn't expected to ever need to ask. Are you a messenger sent by the Nameless? Nobody in that courtyard knew what that meant. Yeo-Un didn't answer. The question hung in the air between them, and something behind her eyes had shifted. Not fear, not hostility. Something closer to the look a person gets when a door they had locked for years suddenly opens from the wrong side. Yeo-Un doesn't wait for an answer. She launches into him again. Not a test this time. Not a greeting. She's been waiting for something to be angry at for a long time. But Yeo-Un doesn't just hold his ground. While their blades collide, he's already working out what her version of the technique is missing. She's fixed the weak points that her lineage never cracked. Corrected the gaps. Refined it into something nearly complete. Nearly. He can feel the difference in the way she moves through the form. The order is wrong. The intent isn't unified. It looks like the same sword. It isn't. He breaks through her pull. She crashes. Her sword hits the floor before she does. She's still breathing hard when he speaks. He asks her a question that cuts through everything else. Does she have ties to the Sword Sect or the Shadow Sect? She flinches. That tells him everything. What follows isn't a negotiation. It's a door opening. She's been carrying a 500-year grudge with nowhere to put it. The ancestor of her sect, Hong Su-yan, was supposed to be the one. He was loyal. He kept the flame alive when the other two got greedy, when they schemed to use their swords and their status to climb into the patriarch's bed. The sword demon abandoned those two for it, and somehow, through council politics and slander, and a decade of forced silence, it was those two families that got declared the official heirs of the sword demon's legacy. The sect that actually preserved it got locked away and forgotten. She has spent her entire life trying to restore what her ancestor lost. Yeo-Un listens. When she's done, he makes her an offer. He can give her what 500 years couldn't. He doesn't explain it. He shows her. First, the evolved demon sword, the technique she's been chasing her whole life, demonstrated clean and complete in a way she has never seen it. Then, something she didn't know existed. The 24 demon sword, the sword demon's true legacy, the art that was locked away in the Academy's deepest vault, accessible only to someone who'd done what no student had managed in 80 years. Yeo-Un performs the first form. The air changes. She collapses to the ground, not from the impact, from what she feels. Something she'd been reaching toward her entire life just clicked into place. Her observers see it externally, the unification of the 5 energies, the threshold that defines the ultimate stage of cultivation. Muhua Yan, already stronger than the Academy's deputy, breaks through to the peak of power in the space of a single demonstration. She doesn't celebrate. She sits in the feeling for a moment. Then she rises, crosses to where Yeo-Un stands, and kneels. She vows her loyalty to the true successor of the Sword Demon. Third Elder secured. But the moment she swears in, the situation gets complicated. One of her own people throws a dart from somewhere inside the manor. His follower catches it in the air. There's a second man, grabbed before he can run. The first spy bites down on a poison tooth the moment he's restrained, dead before he can be questioned. The second holds out longer. Yeo-Un breaks his bones one at a time, but he won't give up a name, just holds his jaw shut and takes it. Sword Sect spies, embedded in her household for 10 years, watching her, reporting back on every move she made, every visitor who managed to get through her door. She was furious before. Now she's something colder. Inside her study, she fills in the rest. 8 years ago, a masked man appeared outside her manor at night. No name, no face. He said only, "Call me the Nameless." He defeated her in a single form, not by a little, by a lot, and then invited her to a mountain peak at the edge of the world. She went, and when she arrived, she found 2 people she never expected. The chief of the Sword Sect and the chief of the Shadow Sect, standing in the dark, waiting for the same thing. The Nameless wasn't there to pick a side. He was there to test all 3 of them. He believed the Sword Demon's legacy should pass to whoever actually deserved it, not whoever happened to carry the right bloodline or run the right political play. He demonstrated the evolved demon sword. Then he demonstrated something none of them had ever seen or heard of, the 24 demon sword. First form only. And even that, even just the first form, left him shaking and unsteady on his feet when it was done. He gave them 3 years, said he'd be back. 3 years later, neither of the other 2 had cracked it. He gave them 2 more years and showed the first form again. Same result. Drained, wobbling, not quite strong enough to carry it cleanly. Then he showed them something else, a counter to the 24 demon sword. The other 2 seemed to recognize it. She didn't. That session was 3 years ago. The final test is in 2 weeks. Yeo-Un doesn't react to the timeline. He thinks. The Nameless knows the name of the 24 demon sword. That name doesn't exist anywhere except in the vault beneath the manual library, inside the Academy, a place no one has accessed in 80 years, because accessing it requires passing the 6th examination, which no student had done until him. The current patriarch is in his 50s. The math doesn't add up to someone currently in power. Whoever the Nameless is, he reached that vault before Yeo-Un. He knows the technique. But he can't perform it at full strength. The wobble, the cost, the exhaustion after a single form. He learned the art. He hasn't mastered it. There's a ceiling somewhere above where he currently stands, and Yeo-Un is already past it. He doesn't say any of this out loud. He just decides he needs to meet this man face to face. The Warrior Dance Sect is large for what it is, a manor that nearly rivals the 6 main sects, run by a man who has been watching Yeo-Un's rise from the official witness seat of the 6th examination. A-sama greets him at the table like a man who's been waiting for this conversation. He seats Yeo-Un at a feast, pours the best wine in his cellar, and then introduces his daughter, young, shy-eyed, Chak-sama's sister. The elder's reasoning isn't hard to read. His sect has climbed to high-ranking status, but it's still below the 6 main sects, and has been for generations. The old order was built on bloodlines, alliances forged through marriage, families locked into power structures that nobody who wasn't born into them could touch. Now the old order is crumbling. 2 of the 6 major sects are gone. The man dismantling the rest is sitting across his table, not yet 20 years old, and he doesn't yet have a wife. The elder makes it. Yeo-Un is quiet through the whole approach. His companion Yeo-Un is not as composed on the inside. She doesn't show it. But her heart is doing something she hasn't had a name for until now, sitting in that room while a stranger's father offers his daughter to the person she's sworn her life to. The feeling arrives all at once, fully formed. She's been in love with him the whole time and only figured it out right now. in the worst possible moment, wearing a face that isn't hers, in a room where someone more eligible is being introduced with a bow. She is still. Nobody sees it. Yeo-Un doesn't accept the proposal and doesn't reject it yet. He asks one question, simple, direct. If he declines, will the elder still be his witness? The room shifts. The elder is caught. His daughter steps forward before he can answer, and she dismantles the leverage herself. Her father prepared this out of genuine belief, not as a trap, not as a transaction. He actually thinks Yeo-Un is the right person for the minor priesthood and wanted to offer something real alongside his support. Yeo-Un thanks her and declines. He says he would rather marry someone he truly loves. He stands to leave. The elder doesn't let him reach the door. He kneels before Yeo-Un has cleared the threshold. Kneels, identifies himself by title and sect, and vows his loyalty. The jade medallion comes out of his robes and sits in Yeo-Un's hand before another word is spoken. 4 elders, 8 more to go, and somewhere out there in 2 weeks, a masked man with no name and a technique he can't quite carry is about to test 2 of Yeo-Un's enemies for the right to inherit the Sword Demon's legacy. Yeo-Un is already thinking about how to be there first. 4 elders down, 8 to go. A masked man holding a technique he can almost carry. A sect chief who doesn't know yet that everything he built is gone. And Yeo-Un Chen, who has 2 weeks, a counter nobody's seen, and absolutely no intention of arriving second.